Hi, I'm Father Barnabas Powell, and I'm right outside Saints Raphael, Nicholas, and Irene Greek Orthodox Church, introducing this Sunday's homily. This Sunday is the Sunday of the man born blind, and in this gospel lesson we discover there's actually more than one blind person in our gospel lesson. Physical blindness is one thing, but spiritual blindness, blindness has eternal consequences. So this is this Sunday's homily. I hope that you're blessed by it. I hope it encourages you, and I hope it helps you see. By the way, I apologize for the sound quality. We had some problems with our sound, but I hope that you'll be able to pick it up anyway. God bless you, and welcome to Saints Raphael, Nicholas, and Irene Greek Orthodox Church.
As we begin this work this morning, I'd love to tell you a story from my past. May I do that? Many of you know that my past included a time when I was a Protestant pastor for many years. I pastored a Protestant church in Woodstock, Georgia. And before I began pastoring, I'd gone to my first stint at theology school. My undergraduate degree was in pastoral counseling. Doing a lot of reading in pastoral counseling and doing a lot of study in pastoral counseling, I learned some interesting things. One of the things that I learned was that it is your job as a counselor to help the person that you're talking to discover for themselves what they already know. I scratched my head at that. What do you mean? I thought if I was a counselor, then I'm there to guide them and to give them to tell them what to do. And they said, "Oh no. You're supposed to help them." He said that all of the studies say that most everybody pretty much knows what they ought to do. That there are very, very few people on the earth that really just have no clue. But that the counselor's job, and you know what, folks, I found this to be true. The counselor's job is to help the person discover what he or she already knows they ought to do. To give them the courage. As the years have passed, I have found this to be exactly right. 99.9% of the people who come to see me and say, "Father, I need your help, I need your counsel," every one of them know what they ought to do. 99.9% of the time, they already know what they ought to do. They just need help coming to grips with the implications of their choices. That's what we're supposed to be. And I'm convinced, brothers and sisters, that every one of us here this morning pretty much knows the kind of life we ought to lead. We know the direction we ought to go. We know how we ought to conduct ourselves in business. We know how we ought to conduct ourselves in our homes. We know how we ought to treat our wives. We know how we ought to treat our children. We know how we ought to treat our husbands. We know how we ought to treat one another. We know how we ought to treat our neighbors. We already know 99.9% of the time, we know what we ought to do. So, where's the problem? Where's the disconnect? Well, I'm convinced, brothers and sisters, that this morning's gospel lesson gives us exactly the reason why there is a disconnect between what we know we should do and the things we do end up doing. How we know we should live and the things we end up doing in our lives. I don't know about you, but if I could go back in time, there would be a few things I'd tweak. Yes? Yeah, me too. The story in the gospel lesson today is about a man born blind. A man born blind. In fact, when the disciples come across this man, they ask Jesus a very, very interesting theological question. "Lord, who sinned that this man was born blind? Was it him or was it his parents that sinned?" Isn't it amazing? For those of you who have ears to hear, let them hear. Isn't it amazing that even Jesus with his disciples, even at that time, was trying to deal with their misconceptions about God's foreknowledge? Because the idea was in popular Jewish teaching at the time that if a man was born blind, if you were born with a malady, it was because God knew in his foreknowledge that you were going to sin, so he punished you ahead of time. Very interesting ideas of predestination and God's omniscience. Interesting. Jesus said, "What?" Actually, that's not what he said. But that was a gesture. This man didn't sin, and his parents didn't sin. Do you think this is God? Do you think this is what the Father is like, that he would punish somebody like this? Are you serious? Again, my own embellishment. Neither this man nor his family sinned, but this occurred that the glory of God might be revealed. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. In our gospel lesson today, we see that this man born blind begins to see, and then he gets in trouble with the Jewish leaders, the religious people, the good people, the respectable people. Started giving him a hard time because Jesus had made mud on the Sabbath day. And you weren't supposed to work on the Sabbath day. And Jesus anointed this man's eyes with the mud, and he told him to go and wash his face. Well, all of you know this story very, very well, so let's get to the heart of it, shall we? There were two groups of blind people, dear ones, in this story. The man who was born blind, and everyone else around Jesus who might have been able to see with their eyes, but their hearts had been darkened, and they were blind spiritually. And dear ones, make no mistake about it, a spiritual blindness is much more deadly than any physical blindness can ever be. How do I crack your skulls open and pour this in so you get this right? I don't know. I hope I can. A spiritual blindness, where I am spiritually blind, where I am spiritually darkened, where I am spiritually insensitive, where I lack the ability to see into the deeper things of real life, that is the place where I am constantly finding myself tripping up in my spiritual life and in the choices that I make, the 99.9% of the time where I know how I should be that I'm not. The reasons why that I continue to make those same mistakes over and over again and have a pattern of destructive behavior in my own life is because of spiritual blindness. And dear ones, spiritual blindness is the most deadly blindness of all. But Jesus gives us, in this wonderful gospel lesson today, 3 powerful directions on how to overcome spiritual blindness. We see it in how he healed the blind man, and we see it how the blind man and Jesus confronted the spiritual blindness of the religious people of his day. I almost want to break out in song. I'm trying to remember the guy's name who sang this song. There is none so blind as he who will not see. What was his name? Does anybody remember? It's just us. I mean, it's okay. I mean, these folks won't mind. Something like that, anyway. But that's really true. There is none so blind as he who will not see. I have met stubborn spiritual people. I have met people who are so stubborn in their spiritual life that their hearts have never been softened enough to make the choices necessary to become the man or the woman that God has called them to be. I've met those folks. Truth is, I've been that man in my own life, where I know what I should do. Let me make it very practical for you. I would love to lose weight. Do you know I know how? I do. I know how to lose weight. This is not complicated. It's just not. But I don't. There is a blindness. What my mama used to say, my want to's broke. But Jesus gives us 3 powerful insights into the path out of spiritual blindness, and that if we accept them, if we have the courage enough to embrace these 3 insights, brothers and sisters, I can tell you now, you will leave this building this morning with the ability to spiritually see the man or woman you are called to be. You do this morning. You leave this building with the courage to embrace these principles, and you will leave this place today able to spiritually see the direction your life is supposed to take. That's pretty bold stuff. Let's see if I can carry it out. The first powerful insight is obedience. In our gospel lesson this morning, Jesus Christ makes mud out of spit. By the way, one quick rabbit trail. Do you mind? Isn't it interesting that in the beginning God formed man out of the dust of the earth? And here Jesus is healing a man born blind with that same dust. A sacramental life, a sacramental worldview. This created world is good. This created world was meant to reflect the glory of God. Why do you think we Orthodox use so many physical things to declare the glory of God? Why do you think we chant? Why do you think we use incense? Why do you think we have icons? Why do you think we use tactile things to express the glory of God? Because, brothers and sisters, this creation was meant to reflect the glory of God. Those who choose not to worship this way, we're not talking about being right or wrong. That's not even the issue. It's less than full. The fullness is we gather up all of creation back and we offer it back to God. And the sacramental priesthood of what it means to be men and women created in the image of God to bring glory to God. Isn't that great? God took the dust of the earth, and here Jesus takes dust, mixes it with his spit, and tells the man to go wash in the pool of Siloam. That's interesting. The pool there, the name literally means sent. The first act, the first powerful insight of overcoming spiritual blindness is your willingness to obey. Your willingness to obey is the first step in becoming spiritually sighted. Jesus commands you to go to the pool and wash your face. What does the man do? He goes to the pool and washes his face. Guess what happens? He comes back seeing. The first step this morning for us in becoming spiritually sighted, in being able to finally see what it means to truly be an authentic believer in Jesus Christ, an authentic disciple, is our willingness to obey. And obedience is so tough, dear ones. Trust me, I have children. Obedience is tough. Because obedience requires a level of humility that many of us do not possess, and we certainly haven't cultivated. But this ability to humbly confess that if I obey, I will do well. If I obey, I will see clearly. Obedience is always the key, because obedience requires me to confess my own humility. Obedience requires me to confess my own need of the one to whom I am obeying. Obedience requires me to be an authentic disciple. The second powerful insight in overcoming spiritual blindness, not just obedience, but then courage. What do you mean courage, Father? Well, brothers and sisters, I'm going to tell you right now, we live in a world where it is very easy to not be a purposeful Christian. We live in a world where it's very easy to be nominal. We live in a world where it is very easy to just kind of pay lip service, to go through the motions. We live in a world where it is very easy to say we're one thing and then very much do many other things that are very different from the Christian faith. We live in a world where it's very easy to do that. It takes courage today and as always. It takes courage to be a purposeful disciple of Jesus Christ. It takes courage. And I wonder, brothers and sisters, as we look at our own lives, where is the... Well, let me just bring this down to myself. As I look at my own life, where is the place where I lack the courage to make the choices to be the purposeful disciple of Jesus Christ? I confess to you there are many. That's the reason why I go to confession on a regular basis. It takes courage to go to confession. Did you know that? It takes courage to be in the house of God on a regular basis. It takes courage. Because it's a lot of trouble. Because most of us are very busy people. Because we really do have lots of other things to do. My grass needs to be cut. But the fact of the matter is, in a courageous choice of putting priorities in their right place, we prioritize our life and our time in such a way that reflect what is most important to us. And my question to us today is, do we have the courage to make the choices that are based on what we know to be true? If you're going to overcome spiritual blindness in your life, it is going to take an act of courage. Finally, not only if I'm going to spiritually be able to see, I'm going to have to be obedient. If I'm going to spiritually be able to see clearly, I'm going to have to be courageous. And if I'm going to spiritually be able to see how I should conduct my life, I'm going to have to become a worshiper. Isn't it interesting? Jesus Christ finds the man after he's been kicked out of church. That's what happened, by the way. When they cast him out of the synagogue, they kicked him out of church. He was excommunicated. They were telling him, well, how did this happen? Well, I've already told you how it happened. Do you want to become his disciples too? Oh, no, we're disciples of Moses. You were utterly born in sin. How dare you teach us? And they cast him out. That meant that they kicked him out of the synagogue. They excommunicated him. He couldn't come to church no more. Isn't it powerful? The power of spiritual blindness to create such destruction and enmity and anger. Isn't that powerful? That's what spiritual blindness does, folks. Spiritual blindness creates anger and bitterness and division and hatred and self-centeredness. Anytime I see that in my own life, I know it's because I am spiritually blind in a place in my life. So after they kicked them out of church, Jesus finds him and says, and he asked him, he said, do you believe in the Son of God? Do you believe in the Son of Man? And the blind man said, sir, you show him to me and I'll worship him. And Jesus said, the man who is talking to you is he. The scripture says, the man declared, I believe, and he worshipped. What that literally means, the word there is proskuneo, to kiss toward. He literally means he got down on his knees and bowed before him. To kiss toward. Why do you think we kiss icons? I'm just saying. Because if we're ever going to spiritually see, we are going to have to become men and women who see clearly enough to learn how to adore God. Because I will never treat my brother and sister like I should if I do not treat God as he should be treated. I want to say that again because that's extremely important. You will never have a relationship with your husband or your wife that is healthy. You will never have a relationship with your children that is healthy if your relationship with God is wounded by your inability to truly learn how to adore him. And the school of adoration happens here every week. Learning how to adore God. That's the reason why, brothers and sisters, I encourage us all to find a place in our life where we come regularly to the house of God to learn how to adore God, because I will never make sense of out there if I do not understand what's happening in here. What occurs in this building every week is the education, the university of life that gives each of us the ability to make sense of our relationships in our everyday life. If I'm going to spiritually see clearly how to be the man or the woman that God has called me to be, I'm going to have to learn how to adore the Holy Trinity. I'm going to have to learn to adore God. Learning how to adore God leads me to learning how to properly venerate or honor my brothers and sisters. Because veneration is the stepping stool to adoration. Veneration, having dignity and beauty and honor and decorum. Those principles build into my life an openness and an ability to see each other as the creation of the image of God. And if I see in each of you the image of God, and I learn how to adore God, how will I treat you? Brothers and sisters, the old song says, there is none so blind as he who will not see. This morning, would you take a moment of spiritual inventory in your own heart? And look and try to find, and ask the Holy Spirit, Lord, show me where I'm blind. Show me where I can't see clearly to become the man or the woman that you've called me to be. Lord, show me. And in doing so, be willing to obey, be willing to be courageous, be willing to worship. Brothers and sisters, as the blind man said this morning, I don't know a lot of things, but one thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see.
Thanks so much for joining us this Sunday for the Sunday of the Man Born Blind. I pray that these powerful insights, these 3 powerful insights on how to overcome spiritual blindness, helps you grow spiritually, helps you mature spiritually, and helps you incorporate more and more of the powerful gifts that the Church of Jesus Christ has preserved in this timeless faith for over 20 centuries. By the way, I'd love to see you on a Sunday morning sometime. Our services start at 8:45 with morning prayers and 10 o'clock divine liturgy every Sunday here at Saints Raphael, Nicholas, and Irene Greek Orthodox Church. And by the way, if these videos are a blessing to you, they may be a blessing to your family as well. Go ahead and forward them to your family and friends and help them discover more and more about the beauties of our rich and powerful Greek Orthodox faith. I'm Father Barnabas. I'll see you next Sunday.